Our first lesson is written in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. Keep your lives free from love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." Our gospel reading is written in Luke 12, chapters 13 through 21. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me judge and arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in with the abundance of his possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God."
Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. Things of this earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Dear friends, as we continue this series on Twisted, we think of the words of Jesus in our gospel lesson that Doug just read to us. Be on guard against every kind of greed. For a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he owns. Satan does twist so many of God's truth and brings about such deception. And we think of how this world continues to tell us if you just had more, if you had something newer, if you had something faster, if you had something bigger, if you had something better, you will have contentment and satisfaction. It's like a couple who lived in the foothills of the Rockies. Beautiful piece of property, and they got talking that we've been here long enough. It would be nice to have a little bit more land. It'd be nice to have a bigger home. And so they called their realtor who had sold it to them and said, "You know what? I think we're going to put our property up for sale. You want to come out and get some pictures and write up a synopsis?" And the realtor did and emailed it back to them. And the realtor was somewhat surprised that he didn't hear anything. So about 3 days later, he called and said, "You haven't responded in any way." They said, "Well, you know what? We sat down, we looked at the pictures, we said, how could anything be more beautiful? And the synopsis that you offered on our property," we started saying, why would we want anything more? How could we find anything better? How could I want anything more? And yet think of how often we ask ourselves that question in life. Because we live in a world that's screaming around us. You deserve more. You need to have more. If you purchase more, if you go bigger, if you go better, if you go faster, if you go stronger, if you just get more, there's going to be more satisfaction and contentment. We even turn it to the negative and say, I want more happiness, I want more pleasure, I want more excitement in life. I want more anger, I want more bitterness, I want to hold grudges so that people will respect me and people will realize that I mean business. It's all about more. And yet, the sad part is whatever is more always comes with a price tag. And what are you willing to pay for more? A professor did a study at a university where he set up a room like a game room, a TV game show room. And he invited people in, 100 of them. And he had a wheelbarrow that was filled with $10 million. Actually, $10 million. And the people got to hold it, they got to touch it, they got to caress it, they got to kiss it. They pushed it around. And oh, they were so excited. Then he started asking the questions. Here's the results. 31% of those individuals said they would do something unethical and immoral, even if it meant killing, robbing, or stealing in order to have that $10 million. 25% said they would divorce their husband or their wife and their children and never to have a relationship with them again in order to have that $10 million. 25% said that they would separate themselves from their relationship with God in their church and never believe or worship again in order to have that $10 million. 16% said that they would leave this country and turn over their citizenship never to come back in order to have that $10 million. Here's the amazing part. Just 3%. 3 people. Just 3 people said the money isn't that important to me. I'll live with contentment in my life. So Max Lucado, in his great book, When God Whispers Your Name, offered this statement: man condemns the things that are eternal for the sake of gaining the things that are temporal. Isn't that tragic? But it's so true. We'll condemn and walk away from the very things of God in order to have more here in this world. And then wonder why we're confused. My friends, that's greed. Wikipedia describes greed this way: an excessive desire to possess wealth or goods with the intention of keeping it all for myself. That's exactly the story that Jesus told in our gospel today. A man comes and says, we're having a little trouble dividing up the inheritance. And I think all of you know the Jewish law that the first son got 2/3 of everything a father owned, and the rest of the sons divided whatever was left. Women didn't have a role back in that society. And so here they were having a dispute over the things of inheritance, and a man says, Jesus, could you help us get this divided? And Jesus has a pretty strong rebuke in offering that word, man. Man, what makes you think that I came here to be a judge and an arbiter over civil cases that have to do with money, which doesn't make any difference at all to me? I've got more important things to offer and to give. He said, it reminds me of a story that would go like this: that a man began to look at his possessions and said, I need bigger barns and I'm going to get more. And I'm going to invest everything in this world. And everything's going to get bigger and it's going to get better. And it's going to be mine and it's going to be mine and it's going to be mine. And Jesus said, has anybody ever thought of this? Whose is it when he dies? And what good did it do to invest all his time at that point? Stay away from all sorts of greed, because a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions.